Welcome to Storm Watch. We're going to talk to some of the most important decision makers in Niagara. This is online. You can get us 24 hours a day. Today, my guest is Superintendent Bob Wright of the Niagara Regional Police. Bob, welcome.
Thanks, John.
You and I have talked a lot over the past years. We're going to talk today about what some people call police oversight, or who's in control of the police. Give us a brief description of police oversight.
Well, generally, when we talk about oversight in Ontario, we tend to be talking about civilian oversight. And there's a number of different levels of civilian oversight for policing in Ontario. At the most basic level, we're managed or led by a police services board, which is appointed civilians from the regional government and from the provincial government. And then when we talk about police conduct, we're talking about the Special Investigation Unit, who looks at any possible criminality in the use of force, generally by police officers. There's a quasi-juris board called the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, and they oversee both the adequacy of policing and kind of police tribunals, that side of things.
So, Bob, who's in charge of, say, an investigation? Could the chair of the board say, I want you to investigate that grow up?
No, that's prohibited. It's prohibited by the Police Services Act. And not to minimize what the Police Services Board does, but they're pretty much restricted to the administrative side, to policies and procedures. But they are very much hands-off when it comes to any kind of operational investigation.
So when an officer is allegedly committing a crime, who lays the charge?
Well, in most cases, if that happened, it would be us. There are cases where, for a number of reasons, it goes to another agency. But typically, if the police service becomes aware of conduct that is any type of police conduct, we start to investigate that under the Police Services Act. Let's say that's the starting point. If it goes down a criminal road, we would most likely just lay that charge ourselves, and that does happen on the rare occasion. If for some reason we thought we couldn't do it, or just because from an optics point of view or scale we wanted to go outside, there are parts of the Police Services Act that allow us to ask another police agency to do that investigation.
And you probably don't know the number of officers that have been charged over the past few years, but the public impression, Bob, is that they're charged and then they're acquitted. That's the public impression. Is that correct?
Well, that's like anything in the world. Let's look at some really general ideas. The Niagara Regional Police probably goes to 150,000 calls for service a year, and only about 100 complaints a year come in about police conduct, which is very small. And then another very, very small portion of that would involve any criminality. And then the judicial system remains the same. I'd like to say that Canada has one of the fairest judicial systems in the world, perhaps not perfect. And at the end of the day, there's a big leap from this officer may have done something wrong, may have erred, may not have done this as well as he could have, and committed a criminal act.
Right.
You need intent for criminality, whether it's a police officer or a citizen or anyone. So yes, sometimes, but we've convicted police officers of criminal offenses. It's a sad thing to say, but police officers remain human beings, and there's always going to be people who make mistakes.
I always talk about people who don't engage in the community, and these are just some bit straight questions that they are unaware of, or that they're unaware of the answers. If someone senses that they have been wronged somehow by a member of the force, what should they do? What should that private person do?
Well, nowadays, it's all overseen by what we call OIPRD, which is the Office of Independent Police Review Director. And even though our local officers most of the time do the actual investigating of it, that group oversees it. And they ensure that both the quality of our investigation, and then they have to agree with our decision.
Oh, very good. And then there's the SIU. What is the SIU?
SIU comes into play where someone has been seriously injured or killed as a result of an interaction with a police officer. Usually it's relating to using force. And most of the, originally it involved around police shootings, those kind of things. The mandate also now, takes, let's say, a lower view of what a serious injury is. So if someone gets a broken bone, that becomes an SIU investigation.
And Bob, when you've been a police officer for a long time, lots of experience, when you look into the future, I know this is not an official notion, but do you see it changing further, this notion of police oversight?
Well, I think Ontario is kind of the model of police oversight. And, things need to get better. Like in all things, you work out the bugs. And when we're dealing with legislation, it takes a significant amount of time to change. But I think, Ontario is a model for the interaction between, civilian oversight to policing.
People are still talking, some people are talking about the G20 in Toronto, and their question is, what went wrong? Thousands of people were arrested and then let go. It did not seem like Canadian police service.
Well, I wasn't involved in it, and it's hard for me to comment, but I think at the end of the day, you have to realize the magnitude of that event. And whether errors were made or not, at the end of the day, it wasn't that bad. And I'm not minimizing anyone's civil rights being violated if that happened, but at the end of the day, it was like the French ambassador said, this is just like a bad soccer game.
Well, there are certainly some people who believe the next time we have a G20 that you should put them all on a boat in the middle of the ocean so we don't have this conflict.
Well, it is really important that people have the right to protest. And as a police officer, I say that legitimately. But I think sometimes in these situations, certain special interest groups kind of steal the moment. And it's sad because you didn't hear very much about what the people were out there protesting about. And obviously to them, it was very, very important. And we don't want it to get clouded in a message of violence and police conduct.
When I think about police oversight again, it seems to me that most police that I know want to do the job, and the board of the police service has its job, and there's a provincial component. Do you believe that most officers are concerned about the politics of budget and taxes and public perspective?
Well, I think they're aware of it. They're aware of it through media. But I think at the front line, they probably see the most simple solutions. And I think they probably see a lot of our things are clouded with some degree of bureaucracy. And at my level, I'm trying to find a balance.
The police service is changing very quickly. A lot of officers are close to retirement. You were getting a lot of new people come in. What do we look for these days in a good police officer?
Well, we're looking for a diverse group of police officers, and the police has changed dramatically since I started, and we're looking for balance between men and women, a diversity that reflects the community. That's what we're looking for in police officers. We're looking for intelligent people, and one of my favorite things is we're looking for people with empathy, who can understand the community that they're dealing with. And a police officer has to be a lot of things, on any given day. And at the end of the day, when things are the worst, they have to be able to, deliver force and protect people and do all those kind of things. But they have to have the compassion on a day-to-day basis to really help the public.
I know people, and my own view is that I see some very good work by more seasoned police officers. Some of the brand new ones need more training in terms of dealing with difficult situations. They've got all this gusto and gung-ho attitude, but you need some sense of, as you say, how to deal with people. You don't have to arrest everybody in sight.
No, and that obviously that's true, but it's a learning curve for every police officer. And I think it's a tremendous challenge. There's an awful lot of legislation they have to deal with nowadays. We talk about oversight. Another oversight is just civil litigation, and you're always open, and the service is always open to civil litigation. And I think police officers are more tentative than they were in my era, and probably for very, very good reason. The motto of the police service when I started, which would be politically incorrect at this time, was just simply trust in God and do what's right. Pretty simplistic instructions.
Well, it's a very different world today.
It is, for sure.
Bob, I want to thank you very much for coming. We'll have you back. These are some very large issues that we want to make as simple as we can for everybody. So appreciate your time.
Always glad to be here, John.
Okay. And I'll see you next week.